So the second step to painting your cherry blossoms, and we'll also use this tomorrow when we paint fish, is learning how to put multiple colors on your brush, which is called loading your brush. Okay, so for right now, just to do the concept, I just want you to choose 2 colors, okay, just so that you can see. I want you to choose a bright color or like a light color, and then a more powerful, like darker color. So my bright color, which will be very helpful tomorrow when we do fish, I'm going to choose yellow as my first color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dip my brush into my water, okay? And then I'm going to load my entire brush. So you can see I'm kind of putting my brush in the pan. Hold on, someone just came into the waiting room. Okay. I'm stamping my brush into the pan. And this is the reason why I chose a white brush today. I'm trying to make sure that the yellow paint is going all the way up the bristles. Do y'all see what I'm saying? Okay. I don't want it to just be on the tip. So I'm actually kind of holding my brush to the side and going like this and making sure that I'm really getting the paint on all the way up the brush. Okay. You do have to make sure the paint is wet. So, you still have to dip it into the water. Okay. But I'm making sure that my brush is like full of yellow paint, for lack of a better word. Yes, no, maybe so. Okay. Now from here, if I dip the brush into the water again, I'm kind of washing the paint out. So I don't want to dip back into the water. I just want to go straight into another color. If I need that color to get wet, because that does help the color spread, sometimes I'll just get a different paintbrush. Ooh, that paintbrush was dirty. I didn't even wash it out all the way. Okay. Ooh, I'll use this magenta color actually. I'll get a different paintbrush just to get the paint wet, which is going to get it, started for me. Okay. Then I'm going to come in. All right. And I'm going to dip just the tip of the paintbrush into my new color. Okay. Yes, some of the yellow is going to spread into that paint a little bit. And that is okay. And so if you look at my paintbrush right now, and this is why I chose a paintbrush that was white. If you look, I've got yellow on one side of my brush, and I've got what on the other side of my brush? Yeah, that kind of pinkish reddish color. And then what happens is if I put this brush down on my paper and I paint, look what I get. Y'all see that? Okay, I get 2 colors in one, and then they're going to get this really, especially as it continues to spread, because it's wet, you're going to get this really pretty kind of blendy wet on wet line in between those 2 colors. Does that make sense? And you can literally do this with any 2 colors. You can actually, if you get very advanced, I know I told you guys that I had a Chinese woman come and demonstrate brush painting for us. She could put 5 or 6 different colors on her brush and do that. Okay. But while we're first learning, you probably want to stick with 2. Okay. But what we're going to do, and again, I'll do that one more time. I'll use 2 different colors. Maybe this time I'll do pink as my main color. Okay. So I'm loading my brush with pink paint first. And hopefully you guys are doing this with me and trying this in your sketchbook right now. So again, I have my brush loaded with pink paint. Then I'm going to take the tip of my brush. I'll dip it in a little bit of water. And maybe this time I go into the blue. And you do have to be, you have to hold your brush over the paint differently to control that you're only getting that blue paint on the tip. So now I've got pink on the back and blue on the tip. Okay. And I can go like this. See that? Okay. And that is essentially going to be how she's going to do the flowers, is that brush is going to go down and kind of pick up and go down and kind of pick up and go down and kind of smear and pick up. And she's going to make flower petals like that. Okay. Which is the video that we just saw. And then she'll come back with a black brush and she'll put in like the detail work. but she wasn't using purple and pink. She was using red, white, and pink, essentially. Which white is not really a watercolor color that we have, but we can improvise. We can do like pink and red, etc. Okay. So, and you might want to try out doing different things like putting your brush down and picking it up like that, or doing like a dagger stroke and seeing how those colors mix and blend. Like maybe I try thick and thin. Ooh, that was a terrible thick to thin, but you guys get the idea. Seeing how those colors mix over time. Y'all see that? Just kind of playing around. Now that one's going to keep drying, but it'll end up being really nice. Okay. So you can do it with color. Y'all see that? Did everybody get a semi-successful one that's got 2 colors on it? That was a question. Okay. So one person said yes. Okay. You can also though do it with what I'm going to call a gradient. Okay. So a gradient is when you're using one color, but you are making it go from light to dark. Okay. So I'm going to use black as my example because I'm going to make my cherry blossom tree black. So hold on, my palette is stuck. There we go. All right. I'm going to put my palette down here where hopefully y'all can still see it. Okay. And this is, we should hopefully obviously already know this about watercolor. The more water you add to a color, what happens to that color? It gets what?
Lighter.
Yes. Thank you. The more water you add, the color is lighter. The more pigment you add, the darker or more intense the color. So like right now, I have black. Turn that off. Okay. I have black, but I'm adding a lot of water to it. So if I put this color down right now, my color is gray. See what I'm talking about? Not very black at all. Very, very gray. Okay. So I'm going to load my brush with a watered down color like black, which is going to make it gray. Then I'm going to come in to the black paint. Woo, I just splattered black paint all over myself. Whoops. And I'm going to dip just the tip of my brush in black. So it's the same concept. I made gray and now I'm dipping just the tip of my brush in black. So now when I do this stroke, see how I get that? And then the black paint is kind of fusing into the gray. Do y'all see that? That was an actual question.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I'll do that one more time. Okay, I make myself gray paint first, and I load my brush with gray paint. And again, I can test it out to make sure it's actually gray, and it is. Okay, then just like I did over here, I'm gonna take the tip of my paintbrush and dip it into just the pigment, which is gonna make, you know, my gray paint, the tip of my brush, have a higher concentration of pigment and is going to make it darker. And now when I do this line, I get that. Ooh, that one's even richer. Look at that. Isn't that pretty? And then what I really love is even after it sits on the paper, because it's still wet, those colors still kind of blend with each other for a second. Okay. All right. So we're going to do this with black and white and with color for our cherry blossom. Okay. So what I want y'all to do, okay, having to clear off some of my space, is think back to this concept that we did in the part 1 video yesterday. Okay. Of going thick on one side and thin to the other. Okay. I want you to turn to a clean-ish sheet of paper, because this one is going to be practice. And I want you to turn your paper sideways, right? If you want to get a pencil and sketch out your path first, we're going to all do a cherry blossom. Ooh, let's maybe try to get the sketchbook in focus. There we go. Sorry about that. We're going to make the cherry blossom kind of start in the top left corner. And because the branches usually kind of grow in a downward direction, we're going to have it grow down. Okay. If you're right-handed and it's more comfortable for you to have the tree grow this way down, that's fine too. You just want the branch to kind of start to cascade down. On the edge that you start, it's going to be thick. And then we're going to fade to thin as we go down. But this time, instead of doing just plain black, okay, I want you to start by loading your brush with gray first, which I don't want to do it on my sketchbook, because when I do it on my sketchbook, my I can like leak, for lack of a better word. So again, I'm loading my brush with gray first. And again, you can test that gray on another piece of paper to make sure it's actually gray. I could do that, flip it right there. It's gray. Could I, you know what? I'm actually going to add a little bit more water to it. Let me see how that looks. Okay, I'd say that's gray. All right. So I'm going to load my brush with gray first. Okay. Then I'm going to dip just the tip of my brush in black so that I get that loaded look again. Okay. All right. And this time I'm going to take that brush and I'm not holding it vertically anymore. I'm definitely holding it on an angle now. And remember how we talked about you can take your fingers and kind of twist the brush like this to help it get gnarly. We're going to take that brush and we're going to start thick. And I'm going to kind of twist it and pick it up and let it kind of fade out to like my thin line. And that's going to be my branch. If the first one's not perfect, you know, you've got lots and lots and lots of pages in your sketchbook. Okay. I'm dipping my brush back into the black paint a little bit and just reshaping the tip. So I've got a nice pointed tip on it. And I'm going to come in and maybe I'm just going to kind of give it a couple of other branches. I can even come back with the black tip a little bit. And I like to do this kind of sort of when it's wet. See how I can kind of add a little outline to it. You can even kind of put some marks inside of the tree, but see how that makes the tree look kind of like it's got some shading on it as opposed to just being flat. Okay, so now I'm coming back with the darker black and I'm outlining and I'm going to add some kind of other secondary branches. This one I started out, so I've got to go thin to thick and kind of put that branch on there. Put some more lines. You can add lots of lines if you want to kind of give the tree texture. And I'm going to give it some branches. Okay. Don't give it too many branches right now. Just maybe try to have 3 or 4 branches that come off. If they're not totally perfect, don't freak out. This is, you know, your first time doing this. This one's just practice. So we'll all be okay, I promise. It doesn't have to be perfect. I know some of y'all are perfectionists. If you don't like it, paint what? Paint another. It's your sketchbook. Okay. Kind of gnarly looking. Yes, no, maybe so. Do y'all want me to demonstrate that again, or are y'all okay only watching me do it once?
Again, please.
What was that?
Can you do it again, please?
Yes. Okay. All right. So I'm going to move my sketchbook around a little bit. Let me open it up because I think this side is clean. Okay. All right. So I start by, well, first of all, I've got to wash my brush out. So I start by just loading my brush with just plain gray paint. So that's black with water because I don't have white. So if I want it to be gray, I've got to do plain gray paint. If you want to test it, you know, go to another page and test that color. Make sure you like it. Okay. Then I take the tip of my brush and I load it with the black, but just the tip. Okay. I'll do this one growing the other direction because it doesn't really matter. Although I'm left-handed, so this one's always harder for me. Okay. I'm putting my brush down flat on the top. and I'm twisting it, kind of bending it, and trying to make my line go from thick to thin. And I don't really know what the branch is going to look like. It looks different every time. Okay. Then I just dip my brush in a little bit of water and kind of reshape the tip so that I get a nice pointy tip on the end of my brush. And then I dip back into the black. And I just come back and I'm going to do two things. I'm going to add other branches, but I'm also going to add some texture. So like sometimes I'll come into the bottom and I'll do like a real random kind of, and I don't even have, you can leave white space. Well, I'll do like a real random line like that, kind of almost like I'm outlining the bottom of the tree. You can do it to the top too if the black is darker. You can have another branch come off of the tree while you do it. Okay, and again, the more random, make it look like it's like broken or it's got like some spines in it or something. The more random that you do those lines, the more that it's going to look like, oh, hey, that's an old spindly looking tree. And I will say that, you know, I am definitely a person who likes photo references. I like to look at what I'm painting sometimes. So if you know, you've got your phone and you want to look up a tree branch or a cherry blossom branch to kind of copy while you're practicing, that won't bother me at all. Okay, so now I have two, and that could be something too that you could do, like open your sketchbook up and do two, and then see which one you end up liking better at the end. That's totally up to you. Okay, but that's sort of the start. So step number one is to get the tree and the branch, or I guess the main branch and then the little break off branches. Yes, no, maybe so. Okay. Obviously, you know, if you want to watch this video again later, or you want to practice or whatever else, you're welcome to do that. What I'm going to do really quick right now is I dripped water. Do y'all see it? Bad, bad, bad. See if I can pick it up. Look at that. Thank you, paper towel. Okay, I am going to get clean water because I do want clean water. And I may, if I have a whole bunch of black in my palette, I may also wash out my palette. So I'm going to pause the recording really quick while I do that. All right, so I'm going to turn the page for a second, just so that we can practice doing some flowers with some different techniques first on another piece of paper, and then we can put them on our branch. Yes, no? Okay. Sorry, someone sent me a funny chat that I was reading. Okay. So cherry blossoms, they're essentially, if you guys look at the PowerPoint, they're just pink/red flowers. Okay. They have kind of a misshaped off, like they're not a perfectly round petal. So anything that's round-ish is gonna, and pink is gonna look like a cherry blossom. Okay, so you can do multiple different techniques, but the most important thing is that in your palette, you're gonna need different shades of red and pink. Okay, so we talked about, you know, how you make different shades of a color by trying to figure out which way to turn my palette so you guys can see it the best. How to make different shades of a color by adding water. Okay, so you want to start with your lightest pink color first. So, you know, that would mean lots of water and just a little bit of pink. Okay, which is going to give you, you know, kind of that kind of a color range. You can make it even lighter though by adding what? More water, Miss Walker.
More water.
Thank you. Okay. Then, you know, you could make yourself a brighter red color with more pigment and put it like in a different section of your palette. So now I've got, see how that color's a little brighter. Okay. Then you can, that's why I said you might want to wash your palette out. You know, give yourself an even darker color. So see how I kind of have like different shades of the color in my palette. Sometimes I have kids who want to add a little bit of purple to their color to kind of make it more of like a magenta pink color. So if you want to add some purple to it to make it more of like a magenta pink, instead of a red, you can do that too. You know, so that's with a little bit of purple in it. Okay. But you want to kind of have in your palette, whew, let me catch my breath. Goodness, I'm sorry. You want to kind of have different colors of red in your palette. Okay. Then obviously at any point in time, you can just dip your brush in water but not really wash it out. And then that's going to give you a watered down color. Okay. So you can think about stippling, like one of the most basic techniques. Okay. If you just kind of take your brush, well, this brush is not wanting to do that for me. If you have like a regular, hold on, let me get a regular watercolor brush. If you just have like a regular watercolor brush, okay, and you have, you know, your pinkish reddish color paint, and you just kind of plop your brush down, think like stippling, you're going to get 4 little watery marks. Okay, so I want y'all to think about like a flower for a second. You know how like when you're in elementary school, you know, you learn to either draw a circle like this in the middle and put the petals around it. Do y'all remember drawing this flower when you were in elementary school?
Yes.
Yeah.
Terrible, terrible, terrible. Or you might have learned to just put a dot in the middle and then make the flowers come out like the petals come out like that. Okay. Essentially, that's what we're doing, but we're making it look more advanced because there's going to be like a quote hole in the middle right here. And then I'm just putting random shapes on the outside around the flower like that. Okay. And leaving a little bit of space because when it dries, we're going to come back and we're going to put some like detail in the middle of the flower, because what's in the middle of the flower is always going to be these little like thingies that kind of look like this. They're called stigma or stamen. Do y'all learn plant anatomy when you're in biology anymore? Do they even teach that? Just FYI, plants like pollination and all that, plants have sexual organs. Okay. So the inside of the flower are the things that are producing the pollen, which that's where the bees land. And then they get that pollen and they carry that pollen to another flower. And that's how, you know, germination or pollination happens so that plants can reproduce. So we're going to be putting in these quote unquote reproductive organs into the middle of the flower when it's dry. Okay. So you can just kind of sort of, I have some kids who try to like do individual flowers like this, but then in other areas, you can literally just kind of like, maybe you have a big collection of a lot of flowers on a branch. You can literally just kind of stipple like this and just kind of plop your brush down and get some pink. Then they'll come back while it's still wet. So you do have to do this kind of in a hurry with their darker color, and they'll plop the darker color into it. And see how you do that? When you plop the darker color into it while it's wet, the darker color is going to start, it's like wet on wet essentially. That darker color is going to start to bleed into the other colors. So now I'm going to kind of stipple with my darker color. You know, that's an individual flower versus this is like a little collection group of flowers. Y'all see the difference? Yes, Miss Walker. We love to answer you.
I can see it.
Okay, and then I'll come in with my quote most intense color, and I can add a little bit of it. Okay, and then now comes the very annoying part of just being patient while it kind of sort of dries, for lack of a better word. Okay, so this is kind of sort of technique number 1. Okay, and I'm gonna write it down actually. And there are multiple different techniques that you can do for cherry blossoms. Every artist kind of has their own preference. And so I kind of want you to experiment with them. Technique number 1 is to use the primary brush stroke here is going to be stippling. Okay, then with that, you mix multiple shades. Okay. And then you are using the wet on wet technique to blend. That's kind of technique number 1. Okay. While that's drying, I'm going to kind of show you guys technique number 2. Ready? Yes. Hate my job. I don't hate my job. That was me. Okay. All right. Technique number 2 is the more Sumi-e traditional way. If I can get it here. I don't know if I want this to bleed through or not, but it's okay. Technique number 2 is the Sumi-e brush loading. Okay, so for that, I'm going to load my brush. Which color do you load with first, the lighter color or the darker color? Lauren knows the answer. Anybody at home know the answer?
Lighter one.
Thank you. Y'all are killing me today. I know we're sleepy. I know it's Wednesday and we're not used to being in school, but come on. Okay, so I load my brush with the lighter color first, and then I come back and I put the darker color on the tip. Okay, then now that I've got my brush loaded, and you can test it and make sure it's loaded. Look how pretty that is. Okay, then while it's loaded, I can come in and do my blossoms. And I'm getting the same effect I got here, but I'm doing it in one brush stroke as opposed to multiple. Do y'all see the difference? Yes, no, maybe so. Okay, put a little bit more of the powerful pigment on the tip. Do another flower over here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, this one I'm going to give 6 petals to. 6. Okay, I feel like my projector is a little blurry. Is it blurry or is it in focus for y'all? Looks a little blurry down here.
A little blurry, but it is in focus.
Okay. All right. So again, what I'm doing is if my brush ever gets dry, I've got to like reload the whole thing. But essentially what I'm doing right now is I'm just keep putting fresh paint on the tip only, and then kind of coming in and doing my flower petals. So that's a little bit more of a Sumi-e technique. Okay. And again, Miss Walker, I'm not the master. If I was doing a whole like master painter, like, you know what I'm saying? If I was doing a whole group of flowers, my brush isn't going to show as many of those colors. Oh, y'all can't see what I'm doing. Hold on. Woo. Okay. If I was doing like a whole little group of flowers like this, my brush can't see what I'm doing, or you might not see the, what's it's called as much, the loaded brush, but I can still kind of pat my brush down and get, you know, the idea that there's bunches of little flowers. Okay. Yes, no, maybe so. Okay. Then, and I'm going to do this to both of my flowers because this one is still wet, but I think it's dry enough that I can continue. My last step is to wash out my brush, and y'all notice this time when I washed out my brush, I actually took my fingers and I'm squeezing the bristles out to make sure I get kind of all the water out, get it back into a nice little tip. Okay. All right. And I'm going to take just the tip of my brush. I'm going to go into my black paint. And what am I going to add? Little dots, little lines like this. If they bleed or blend out a little bit, it doesn't really matter. Okay, it's essentially just like, ooh, I don't have enough paint on my brush, hold on. It's dry brushing. It's essentially just like little lines like this. And then sometimes people will put little dots, and those little dots represent the little stigma or stamen that's on top of the flower. Okay. Over here where I have a group of flowers, sometimes I'll just kind of come in And every once in a while, I put a little wet. Put a little black just to give it some kind of emphasis. Okay, down here, these are still wet a little bit, but that's okay. I add in a little black on the inside. And some dots. And that's going to be my cherry blossoms. Okay, so now the fun part is putting these flowers on the actual branch. Okay, which we're going to do in just a second, but I'm going to pause the video again and we're going to take another break real quick. All right, so I'm going to do technique number 1 first. So I'm going to start with my lightest pink color. Okay, which means I'm going to have a little pigment and a lot of water. And I can do this multiple ways. My color looks really light, which is what I want. I can come around my branches and kind of just put little small pink dots like this. If you want to just kind of get like some kind of basis of color started, some of my kids like this look where they just take the brush and have it kind of loaded and then flick it with their finger to kind of sort of splatter a little bit. That is a personal decision that you're going to have to make with what you want to do for your particular red. Okay. I always like to have a few though that are an actual blossom that's like recognizable. So I'm putting in some kind of like a bigger blossom right there. This color is really light. I might actually add a little bit of pigment to it just so I can see it a little clearer. You know, I do like to have a couple places where I can actually recognize an actual blossom. So I'm kind of putting those like 4, 5, 6, however many kind of blots together. Now the black might bleed into it a little bit, and that's okay. You can also let the blossoms come off the branch a little bit. But again, I'm kind of starting with my lightest color and I'm just pulling my blossoms off. I feel like I'm breathing really heavy, but I'm just super pregnant, so I don't really have an option. Wearing this mask is challenging. My color got a little darker there than I wanted, but that's okay. All right. And so I'm just kind of building up my color. All right. Now with technique number 1, I do want some wet on wet blending to happen. So I can't just sit here and stare at it. I've got to work fast enough that I can paint on it while these colors are still wet. So that means I'm going to kind of get my next color or my next, it's not even another color, but I guess my next value, for lack of a better word. And it's going to be a little bit darker or a little bit more intense. Then I'll come in and I'll start dropping that color into my flowers so that that wet on wet bleed can happen. You know, which is essentially just kind of dropping in color and letting it kind of do its thing as it sits on the wet part and kind of spreads, for lack of a better word. So kind of charging my flowers with a more intense color in some areas. I can also do some petals in just that color. You know, like I just did one down there. Okay. Or maybe I want to get that color and I want to get my brush loaded. Maybe. And I want to flick with that color. Why aren't you flicking? Here we go. You can do some splattering with that color if you want. Okay. When you splatter, you do let go of some of the control of like, you know, where the color is going to land and what it's going to look like, but that some kids like that and some kids don't. So you got to kind of sort of go with what you like. I'm going to do other petals, maybe like there's a petal behind it here. So some of my petals can be a little darker than others. kind of add to the ambiance a little bit. Let it kind of bleed. You could pretend there's another branch back there that we can't see. Kind of stipple those out. Add more flowers. Okay. And again, if you are a person that has a hard time visualizing and you need to like look at an actual picture to do this, look at an actual picture. I'm just going off of where the branches are and basically adding little spots. Okay, so I started with my light color, then I did my medium color or value, and now I'm going to go to like my most intense or my darkest value, which for me is going to be the purpley magenta-y color that I made. So I kind of took red and pink and purple and kind of mixed them all together to get a kind of a rich magenta. And that's going to be my most intense color. And since it's my most intense color, I'm not going to put it a lot of places. I'm just going to put it some, just enough that I kind of get a third variation. And see how it's kind of a little bit purpley, but still kind of in the red family. Could I splatter with this color too? I could. Do y'all want me to or no? No preference? Good talk. So glad you guys are so invested in my class today. So I just put that color in a couple of places just to kind of charge. I'll splatter with it. We'll see what it looks like. It might look terrible. It might look great. I splattered all over my painting that time. Okay, and actually looking at mine, I think it needs a little bit more of the light color. I feel like some of my heavier colors kind of dominated. So I'm going to go back to my light pink color and add some light pink in places, just to give it a little bit of that lightness back. Ta-da! Cherry blossoms. Now, I'm not 100% done, but because this is so wet right now, if I go back and add those little black lines inside of my flowers, what's going to happen to those black lines? Yeah, they're going to bleed into the flower petals and it's going to look real bad. So we kind of have to wait for this to dry, essentially. Okay. So instead of sitting here doing nothing while I'm waiting for this to dry, what do y'all think I'm going to do? Wow. Y'all's communication skills are just like on point this week.
And work on your bamboo.
That was a good guess, but no. I'm going to do technique number 2. Although I could work on my bamboo, but I'm going to do, ooh, my painting got wet. That's okay. So on technique number 1, I did the just like stippling wet on wet. On technique number 2, I'm going to actually try to do some Sumi-e loading my brush techniques. Okay. Which means I'm going to start by loading my brush with just the plain red, the light pink first. Which hopefully is happening. I can test that color on another page if I need to. It's light, okay? And then I'm going to come back and intensify just the tip of my brush, like I did earlier when we were doing this. But I'm doing it with light pink and red. Capisci?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
All right.
I can test it and make sure that it did it, and it did, okay? All right, I hope I like how it looks, because now it's there. So now I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna try to do that concept of light to dark, kind of all in one petal. And kind of load it onto my brush. Gonna load the tip this time with a little bit more pink and let my color change a little bit. You always want to think about how it's gonna load onto the brush. So you always want to have the point of the brush be towards the middle of the flower. You'll notice I changed the pink color a little bit. So sometimes I'll do it with a little bit more red. Sometimes I'll do it with a little bit more pink. I try to mix back and forth because it looks a little bit more natural. When my brush dries out, I have to wash it out all the way and then go back to loading it with just the pink first. So I load it with the light pink first. Then I come back and load it with my regular color just on the tip. And I can continue now. On this one, the cherry blossoms are a little bit more defined, probably. They're a little bit bigger than the first one, just kind of a different look. Kind of depends on which one you like. I'd really like y'all to try both and then turn in the one that's your favorite. But it's your sketchbook, so. And again, sometimes I use more red, and I can still go back in and charge it a little if I need to. And sometimes I use more pink. Sometimes I use magenta. My brush is starting to get overpowered, so I'm losing my light color. I'm going to go back into the water for a second. Then go back into my light color. I answered that question yesterday, but I'll answer it again in just a second. If you really like the bamboo brushes, and again, if you really get into the style of painting, you can buy bamboo brushes online at Amazon, which I know is probably not what you guys want to hear, or you can go to Hobby Lobby, or you can go to Michael's. And that's the best place if you want it. I'm going to go to, actually, I'm going to Walmart tonight because I think at one point in time, Walmart actually sold bamboo brushes, but I don't know that they still do. I need to check and see. So when I go to Walmart tonight, I will look and I will see if if they have any, essentially.
Miss Walker, I have a question.
Yes.
Did you post the PowerPoint anywhere? I can't remember if you said if you did or not.
I haven't posted it yet, but I am going to. The reason why I haven't posted it yet is because I'm still adding videos to it, which is why I'm putting the video links in the chat every day. So like all the video links from Monday and yesterday are in the chat. And then tomorrow, like this video that I'm recording right now, when I have to process it and put it on YouTube. So tomorrow, the video that I'm recording today, you guys will have access to on YouTube. But I'm also, if you want the YouTube videos, I can also send them to y'all on what's it's called, on Remind. You just need to ask me. Is there a specific, what part of the PowerPoint are you wanting to look at?
Sorry, there's not a specific one. I just wanted to kind of go over them before I turned in the final ones on Thursday.
Yes, okay, I'll, and I might, well, y'all will see, because tomorrow we still have to do fish. So I might make it that you don't have to turn in the pictures till Friday or Sunday. But I gotta kind of sort of see how far we get in class tomorrow. But yes, I can put the partial PowerPoint on Google Drive tonight. It just won't have all the YouTube links yet, but I can do that after class. Okay. So now I've got to kind of let this one dry. And while it's drying, I'm going to go back down to this one. Okay. And again, totally up to you which one you like better. What am I going to do now? What's my final step? Now that my red is dry, what's my final step? Y'all are killing me today. I just realized the bell's about to ring. So let me just record this real quick and then y'all can clean. Okay. I get black on the tip of my brush. Okay. This would be an opportune time too, if you wanted to like add some more branches or clean up your branches. But I get black. Okay. And I add my little stigma and stamen, my little dots. Do I do it to all my flowers or just some? Okay. Just basically coming back and adding a little bit of detail, which is going to help my flowers look like flowers, especially on the ones that were originally flowers that kind of petaled together. If you want to add like a little branch right here that wasn't there before, or you want to make a little branch a little thicker or a little darker, come back in. Any kind of detail work that you want to do with the black, add little dots, kind of make some flowers appear a little bit. You can do that. See how I did that? Very, very, very easy. Okay. I'm speeding because the bell's about to ring and I want to finish. And again, I can send this video back out tonight. So I'm adding some little black marks essentially. To help make my flowers look like flowers. If it's still wet, they'll bleed together a little bit, but that's wet. It's okay. They'll still look like flowers, I promise. So I will show you guys what this looks like when it's totally dry. So we'll look at it at the beginning of class tomorrow. Okay. So there I kind of sort of have cherry blossoms done in two different styles. Style 1, style 2, and then a different style that was a little bit more stippling was last semester. Actually, it goes that way, style 3. Okay, all different types, but they all kind of have the same approach.
Miss Walker,